All right, I'm super stoked for today's Coach's Corner. So, Coach's Corner is a time to really dig in deeper into some of the specifics of training as a master lead. So, today we have my coach, Jeff Burkart, and also the owner of the Brave Chicken, which is his coaching company. So, Jeff is going to help us kind of understand the difference between aerobic and anaerobic. Do they work together? Are they totally independent? How do they impact us as master leads and how we train? It's a really exciting and important topic. Jeff's going to talk a little bit about his journey as a master lead and how he came up with the name Brave Chicken. And then he's going to openly profess how profoundly inspired he is by me, or at least some of his other athletes. So let's lace him up and head over to Coach's Corner with Jeff Burkart. So we're here today with Jeff Burkart. Jeff, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, John.
You're affectionately known as the chicken in our household.
Well, it should be the Brave Chicken.
The Brave Chicken. Why Brave Chicken? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so, well, originally it was that came to us at a dinner with my family, and I got two kids, and I said, hey, guys, like, I'm going to start my own company, and I'm looking for something that deals with, opposites of each other, like something that deals with psychology and something that deals with physiology as well. So, and we also have kind of like a small little hobby farm with some chickens and a couple goats and whatnot. So, I don't actually know who should get credit for this. I want to say it's one of my kids or maybe even my wife. It wasn't me, I know that, but they came up with it, and they came up with Brave Chicken because it's kind of an oxymoron, right? And as a coach, I try to get people's physiology obviously enhanced and developed over time, but sometimes it's hard because you're dealing with like a human being who comes with different psychological barriers and limitations, and you have to know those stories, and you have to know where to start them, and where that psychology meets the physiology, and your physiology can affect your psychology, and vice versa. Your psychology affects your physiology. So, yeah.
So you're my coach, and it's been an amazing journey, and that's kind of led to some of these conversations here. But what got you into coaching? That's not a path for everybody.
Yeah. So in high school, I started out in a program. It's like an entrepreneurship program that my high school offered, and they probably had a name for it. But so I started out as like
how to lose a lot of money quickly.
Yeah. As a business major essentially. So it was business, entrepreneurship. It was kind of cool. Actually got to like work in banks and stuff like that. Nice. in high school. And then so went to Eau Claire as a business management degree originally, and then kind of decided that if I have to take like one more accounting class, I might not make it. Yeah. Like I love the numbers and I love accounting, but like I just couldn't see myself going down that path, So there's definitely things that I loved about it, but like accounting, I'd say pretty much drove me out of the business. And so had to do some research of like what's next, like where am I going to go? I'm already in school, I'm running cross country and track at Eau Claire, and started reading a little bit about their kinesiology program with an exercise management emphasis, and switched my major. And my business advisor at the time kind of tried to talk me out of it. Actually, he's like, there's no money in kinesiology, and so he almost did. He almost talked me out of it, but I stuck with it, and here I am today.
That's awesome. So, I mean, there's no money in it, but we've had a number of conversations, and it seems like you're just in a very happy spot. Like you love coaching. What is it that drives you? Like what fills you up if it's not the bank account?
Right. For me, it's over time watching people kind of fall in love with the process, and the process then becomes kind of that individual's journey. Right. And then they get to create that, and they get to kind of morph that into what fulfills them. And I get to kind of sit on the sidelines and see where they started, and I can see these things happening along the way. They may not be aware of them at the time, but I can see them happening. I know they're on a good path, and I know they're on a path, and then get to that point where I'm like, all right, I got them.
Yeah,
I got them. They're good. Like they're gonna end up in a better place.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, as we've been training and I've been following your programs. I mean, obviously, I I started with an understanding like, okay, you know what you were talking about, but there were a couple points. Certainly, I think we're in year 3 now. There was a couple points in year 1. I think I remember very specifically where I had rerun the same workout accidentally 2 weeks in a row. The first time I did it, it was like, okay, I crushed it. And then the next week, I just completely bombed it. And I called you. I was like, dude, I don't know what happened. And you're like, oh yeah, obviously, like your body's not ready to run that workout 2 times in a row. And that was like a light bulb, like kind of that standing, like you have a process here that I don't even understand, and I thought that was super, super insightful for me in trusting the process, actually failing, right? Actually being non-compliant in my workout taught me that actually, oh yeah, you actually know what you're talking about. So, I'm training for the mile. You have a lot of different athletes who train for a variety of different things. What do you find to be like the most rewarding part of being a coach?
That's a good question. There's so many different avenues and different types of clientele that I get to work with. This may sound different because it's different than the performance world. Like performance world's kind of like my love, my passion. But performance comes in many different avenues or forms, and so a big base of my clientele is just kind of general population, right? And so like the thing I love doing is trying to trickle in some of these performance aspects into your average Joe, and then kind of watching their life transform. Simple things like one that just happened recently is, the water jug things that people have, like filtered water. They get them like Culligan or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, those are heavy, and so they have to have them like delivered and carried in or whatever. But like, seeing someone have their own like independence to go lift up their own water jug, flip it, put it on, stuff like that, bring in their own groceries, and work, like be aware that they're working grip strength as they're bringing in groceries, like these little tiny things that add up, in a big. So, really it's so kind of the general population is what I actually do find that like super rewarding because maybe it's just because they get so much big change like up front. Athletes are tedious, man. You guys are high maintenance. Those are my easy
we'll
ones.
get into that in a second.
Yeah.
The little prima donnas and divas that we are. Yeah. So, obviously Master Lead is focused on masters athletes. And you've had a chance to work with a lot of different masters athletes through the years. What's one of the most rewarding parts of that? And then what's one of the most challenging parts of working with older athletes?
Yeah, so I work with high school athletes too, right? So I coach at the high school level, and they're kind of nice because you can kind of throw anything and everything at them, and you can have some fun with it. You don't have to worry about as often. You don't have to worry about is like some of the soft tissue injuries. But masters athletes, I feel the most rewarding part is like seeing a masters athlete tolerate like sprinting again.
Yeah.
Because like, it could take a year or 2 years to get them to sub-max sprint, like 80% of like what their potential is for sprinting again, And so like when you can kind of get them back in their connective tissue, their psychology, their brain allows that to kind of release the governor a little bit, the fear behind it, the fear of injuries, like that sort of thing. Like when you kind of get them back to a certain level of performance that's necessary to actually like accomplish that type of goal. Like that stuff is kind of fun and rewarding to see.
So that might lead to some of the biggest challenges too. So what's one of the biggest challenges?
A lot of masters, they have jobs, they have families, they have lives, they have stuff outside of training. They're not just putting everything else on hold.
Right.
So you're trying to figure out how all those pieces of the puzzle go together to create a very, very specific adaptation. And it'd be much easier if we just say, hey, just why don't you quit your job for the next 2 years and
right.
Don't mind your family either. Like, just put them aside and we'll just focus on you,
Yeah.
And most of the time those things probably do make that whole process more rewarding because they're making it all work. They can have it all, right?
Right.
To be a good athlete, I'm definitely not saying you have to, you don't have to specialize that hard. Like some of that stuff serves a purpose and actually, gives it more direction.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot going on in like most people's lives, other than just training. And every athlete's got their own reason why they're doing it. And so, I have to take a step back and respect that and make sure that the frequency, the intensity, the volume, all that stuff matches up to fit that lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely been part of, our journey as coach and athlete too is, aligning on long-term goals. Like I set a very clear one for myself: run a 4 something mile in my 40s, a 5 something in my 50s, a 6 something in my 60s. And I think about the path that I've taken. I would say the biggest challenges for me have not been actually doing the physical workouts. It's been aligning my life that unlocks that potential,
Yeah.
right? And we can talk a little bit more about that. But from work-life balance to nutrition, and what's my relationship with alcohol, and how often am I like how do I fit in workouts
Mm-hmm.
when I'm traveling all the time? Like those are the things that were actually have been bigger rate limiters in many respects than can my body tolerate some of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely for me as an older athlete, constantly just playing that game of like, am I spending time with my family? Am I too tired to do that? So I think it's interesting. I think that's one of the nice things about, your approach, which is there's a physical, and then there's, the brave chicken kind of two sides to both of this, because it plays into it. And you have to be able, especially for masters athletes, the conversations we have is, yeah, okay, there's a biomechanical thing, but how does this actually fit life? And what do we need to do to kind of update that, which I think is really helpful. So talk to me a little bit more about like your journey as a masters athlete. Because by the way, you're really fast. You're an incredibly
Well,
in shape person, and you're a coach. But it
Yeah.
didn't have to be this way,
and that's interesting you say that, because like I'm not sure like if I always view it that way.
right?
even
But
though I know I
objectively, you
pursue
are
that.
right. Like objectively, you are.
Well, after chasing Corey around for 8x400 this morning, I don't know.
Yeah, no, you are.
So, okay, so here's a story. So, I remember graduating from University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, kinesiology major, took an internship at Lifetime Fitness in
Yeah.
Woodbury, Minnesota. And part of that, as an internship, I got to learn how to do like consultations with like new members. So they sign up for a membership, and you get to talk to them about their goals. How do they want to use the gym? What can we help with? What equipment can we show you? Maybe get them on a little sample program,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm working with this guy who's at the time barely 40 years old, young 40s, right? And so I'm 22 at this point, right? And so he's talking to me about his goals, and I'm talking about, answering his questions about like kind of what that would take, how you might want to look
Right.
at certain frequencies, volumes, intensities, that sort of thing. And also he stops me like mid-sentence, and he goes, "Wait, how old are you?" I was like, 22. And he goes, "Oh, you just wait." He
Yeah.
goes, "You're fast, but you're young, and once you get to be 40 like me, he's like, that all changes.
It's downhill.
It's all
baby.
downhill,
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
so and keep in mind, I got no experience. Like, I don't know if this guy's right or if he's wrong or if he's just telling me, fear mongering me or what. I don't know what he's doing. But that kind of stuck with me,
Yeah.
and I think it was good. Like, it's, if I go back, I'd probably thank this guy actually,
Yeah.
but that's kind of stuck with me. And so I've kind of made it like a personal like goal or philosophy to always practice what you preach, and to see, because from an academia standpoint, that's not what I was taught. I was taught that everyone's going to age, right?
Right.
That's a given, and things are going to be different in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s compared to your, teens and 20s
Sure.
and 30s.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So, but there was so much that we could do from a lifestyle standpoint, whether
Right.
it be nutrition, exercise, high intensity, low intensity, strength training, all
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? That you could kind of slow that decay, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, this is going to be fun. Like, I'm going to just kind of take that on as my personal mission, just to see,
Yeah.
what you can do into your 40s. So, I mean, at this point, it's been, that was 22. So, 43 now. So I'm still fairly on the younger side of masters, I guess
Yeah.
you could say.
Yeah.
So still a lot to learn there. And that's what I kind of look forward to, is like, what else is this going to bring? What else are we going to learn like down the road here?
I mean, it is pretty incredible. I mean, when I think about my journey and just kind of pulling back a little bit biologically, I mean, we're performing at just such incredible levels at a biologically advanced age. I mean, that is the truth, right? Yeah, our bodies aren't the same at 21 as we are at 45 or 43 or, wherever we sit. And it's pretty incredible. And I think that's part of for me, part of the Masterly story and journey here is how do we continue to be pioneers in that space to a certain degree, right?
Hmm.
Because there's more of us that are doing it. We're doing it at a different level. We're doing it in bigger in across sports, not just running, right? I mean, we
Right.
both kind of focus on running, but it can be, cycling or swimming or, tennis or whatever. There's an incredible amount of fitness that's happening at a biologically advanced age. And I think it's interesting too. I mean, you talk about sort of the balance between performance and also sort of just continuing to be really active and healthy into your 40s. How did you balance that? Did you have a theory? Did you have a philosophy behind that? Was it just like, dude, I'm just going to stay as fit as possible, as long as possible? Did you have particular goals along the way that have sort of unlocked it? Like, what happened in that 20-year between?
I think I had the luxury of kind of using my own physical body to experiment
Yeah,
with,
yeah.
and talked to a lot of different people, had a lot of different contacts, different mentors. So for me, it was always looking at, okay, well, what's our limiting factor? So like for me, I kind of got like down these, research rabbit holes of like limiting factors,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then once you can start to identify some of those common limiting factors, you can start to reorganize those programs in a way that aren't ridiculous.
So what are like what's a limiting factor? Like what are a couple?
So a limiting factor as we age, our mitochondria will become, less efficient, so to speak,
Yep.
right? So like that's why it's important to be able to maintain like some of your fast twitch fibers so that you can do high end work, so that you can continue to recruit fast twitch fibers. You can use lactate as a fuel,
Right.
and you can use lactate to help fuel some of that. I don't want to use too crazy a language here, but like the mitochondrial like biogenesis that happens through high intensity work, but also low intensity work, right? So
Right.
one of the limiting factors is fear of getting hurt or injury.
Right, right.
So people are like, all right, I'm just going to go marathon training. I'm just going to marathon train
Right.
because I can go long and slow and it's lower risk for injury potentially, right? There's
Right.
stuff that comes along with that as well, but
Yeah, marathons aren't easy.
but yeah, I mean that's one example of a limiting factor
Yeah.
that I could.
I think one of the other things that we maybe lose sight of sometimes are the social factors that have enabled it too. So your wife is an accomplished athlete herself.
Yeah.
How do you think that's impacted your journey as a masters athlete?
It's kind of
You
fun.
just don't want to be slower than her?
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, that is very true. She has definitely beat me head to head. I will admit that. In workouts.
Note
in
that. We're going to put
races.
this,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Um, I think that's a huge part of being, active well
Yeah.
into your 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, I have, not to go, I'll answer your question in a second, but like I have clients who are in their 80s and doing like little races and stuff with their grandkids.
Yeah.
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 But to answer your question, my wife's been probably one of the biggest inspirations for me. So
Yeah.
like the very first time that she came to me and said that she wanted to try to make a Olympic trials team. I mean, we're D3 athletes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did this just because it was fun for us and competitive, and we get to figure out what kind of cloth we were cut from. You
Yeah.
know, and I mistakenly kind of just laughed at it. Like kind of just
Yeah.
like in her face. Like that's funny. Like that's a great goal, but like
So you had to work through that different.
Yeah, we did,
right?
yeah. But then she made me realize that like wait, if at the time we didn't have kids, we did eventually have kids during the process of training for the trials and stuff, but at that time we didn't. So we're like,
Yeah.
well, wait, why don't we just organize our lives, like kind of pretend
Yeah.
that we're professional athletes,
Yeah.
and like just kind of live that lifestyle as closely as we wanted to,
Right.
right? She was working full time, I'm working full time, coaching, training, and she was kind of like the inspiration for all of this. So it kind of kept
Yeah.
me in the game, right?
Yeah.
Because she made it, it was eye opening to me to see what was possible when you set the goal, you set some parameters around it, right? And you work together, and it took both of us, to kind of
Yeah.
train through, and some of the highs and lows, and I got some
Right.
stories on that stuff too. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's really cool, and I think one of the goals, the aims here for Master Lead is to build community, and that's really important. And obviously, partner or spouse is real high intensity, but just surrounding yourself with other people who inspire you, challenge you, motivate you, you can learn from is so important. And again, a big part of what we're trying to unlock here at Master Lead are those insights, and And again, we can talk all about the mechanics and the science and the biomechanics and the whatnot, but there are still these life forces that you have to wrestle with, right, at the end of the day. And what's your motivation? And is your partner supportive or not? And do you have, you know what I mean? Like those kind of things sort of create the space to be able to dream bigger. And part of having these conversations, I think, with Master Lead is, I think a lot of people are having those conversations like you and I, right? We don't just accept that I'm aging. Like I want to kind of push back against that to a certain degree, but I also know I can't do it alone. You know what I mean? And and there, it requires a community and resources and understanding to really do that effectively. So your wife has been a huge inspiration. Anybody else that's kind of, you know, helped pull you along or inspire you along the way?
Oh my gosh, every single one of my clients, every single athlete that I've had the opportunity
Thank you.
to work with. Yeah. There's a couple exceptions. No, seriously though, like every person just comes with like a different story and a different desire.
Yeah.
And like even outside of just like the physiology and the exercise science part and the training aspect, like learning what they do for their jobs or their careers, learning how they grew up, right? What do their parents do? Why, you know, they try to make like associations between where they are today and how they grew up, you know, and sometimes it aligns. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't seem like there's any, you know, correlation or associations to this stuff. But, so like, I find all that stuff fascinating. Like everyone's like unique little story and, you know, what they want to do, where they want to go with it. You know, that stuff to me has just been like huge inspiration to me. Yeah.
And it shows. I mean, I would say very candidly, having watched you interact with a variety of clients in a variety, right? Like from elite masters athletes to, you know, normal people, it's very clear you derive a lot of satisfaction from helping them and that variety. And it doesn't matter where they are, you're definitely meeting them and helping them move along in that journey there. So walk us through prior to starting Brave Chicken, the career and what got you there.
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, like as I graduated from Eau Claire, went on to take an internship at Lifetime Fitness. From there, it's just kind of started out like personal training and working with some of the newer members. Built up a little clientele there and had some fun with that. But then after my first year of working there, Lifetime wanted to bring in metabolic testing. And so they kind of knew my background and stuff like that. So I started taking over the metabolic testing world and then did that for 17 years. Did a little bit of regional work for them too, and basically wrote their metabolic testing protocols, and then taught other metabolic techs how to use the equipment, you know, the advantages, disadvantages of it, how to collect good data, how to then use that data and apply it in actual field and the workouts.
Yeah. And through this period, you've also got sort of your roster of clients that are running through Lifetime as well. And that runs a range, right? I assume sort of running is probably a focus, but would be a spectrum of athletes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially at that time, yeah.
What do you think is the quirkiest type of athlete?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, definitely the distance runners.
Yeah, they're weird.
Yeah, distance runners. Yeah.
And like distance meaning like 5K and above, or like where do you draw the line?
Oh, yeah, you know.
Because I've known some really quirky jumpers too.
Oh, really? Yeah. I'd say 1,500 meter and up.
Okay.
Yeah, they get a little out there.
Weird. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of my best stories on some of my best friends from college, man. They exposed me to some really weird shit. Oh, can we say that? Can say that?
You can say that. Yeah. We won't go to there. We won't go there yet.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Okay. So anything else you want to cover sort of on background?
No, I mean, that's pretty it. I'm pretty much it. Like just, college, Lifetime Fitness for 17 years as metabolic specialist, coach, personal trainer. And then decided, I mean, I always kind of wanted to start my own company. That's why I went into like the exercise management emphasis role at Eau Claire. And also all the way back to high school in the entrepreneurship program. So, so finally just kind of bit the bullet and went with it. Yeah.
So it's, I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for my entire career. What have you found to be like most challenging about just putting the shingle out?
You know, I'm not sure if anything's been like more challenging. If anything, it's just the freedom's fantastic for me based on how I transitioned. And I was so scared for so long to jump ship that like it was a pretty easy transition. So I don't find anything like extremely challenging other than like I had to learn accounting all over again.
Oh no, the
All
accounting
that
comes
stuff,
back, the
but like
revenge of
I did a
accounting.
lot of that too. Like when I managed the metabolic specialist, like it was a lot of,
Yeah.
a lot of that type of work as well.
So let's dig into some more specific topics that I think are really interesting, that have been illuminating as we've had conversations over the last 3 years. Again, kind of based on my journey. And listen, I'm not the brightest bulb, but I turn on every time is kind of my saying. And that's a deep commitment to showing up, being curious, working hard, and of course surrounding myself with great people, of which I'm very grateful to have you in my life and others. So one of the topics that we've worked hard on and has been very illuminating for me is sort of the role or the interplay between your aerobic system and your anaerobic system.
Mm.
And I've read a lot, I've heard a lot about it, and I feel like there's just so much noise out there. And when we've talked about it, you've made it, I think, really clear for me for the first time, sort of what those systems mean, specifically in general as an athlete, right? And maybe we can start there, high level. What is it? What's an anaerobic system? What's an aerobic system, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe start to drill into how those systems are important as a master's athlete.
Sure. Yeah. Well, for starters, the more I learn about this stuff, the more that I don't know about it. Right.
All right.
So
Fair enough.
there's so many levels to this, and depending on the specific question. But so you asked the question, why is it important for master's athletes?
Or what's an aerobic system? Let's just start with basic 101.
Sure.
Yeah. What's an aerobic system? What's an anaerobic? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So the easiest way to explain this is aerobic is with oxygen, anaerobic is without oxygen, right? And so all that means is it's a different energy system that becomes dominant. So when I just go out and run really easy, I'm relying on the aerobic system.
So you're not breathing very hard.
You're not breathing
right?
hard.
You're not
It's pretty chill.
Yeah,
Yep.
pretty chill.
Yep. So typically, aerobic is going to be for the average person. So when I did metabolic testing, usually we would see these inflection points when they start breathing out a bunch of CO2. That means they're burning a bunch of carbohydrate, right? So,
Right.
And they're metabolizing carbohydrate for fuel because the anaerobic systems need to start playing a role. Okay.
Right.
So typically, if your anaerobic threshold is like 80, or your lactate, sometimes I use as lactate threshold. This is where it gets really muddy because there's
so much out there.
70 different
Yeah,
definitions.
right.
But, so aerobic just means that you're using fats predominantly as fuel, and usually that's around like less than 80% of someone's peak VO2.
And most exercise, if we just keep it simple, happens in aerobic capacity, right? Unless you're just running super hard most of the time, right?
Correct.
I'm pulling in oxygen. I'm using some fat energy to sort of push my body forward, whether or not I'm running, whether or not I'm swimming, whatever that is, right? Aerobic. Yep. And is that the bigger of the two systems generally? Like it can perform more work, or how do I think about that?
It can perform longer duration. It's more fatigue resistant,
right?
But it's not going to allow for a really big forceful contraction. Like you're going to rely on the anaerobic systems.
Yeah. So what's anaerobic? That's a very big word.
Yeah, so I think anaerobic capacity is the one thing that masters athletes they need to start early. They need to keep it in their lives for as long as possible, as early as possible.
Okay.
And so what that basically means is anaerobic. If you want to use the anaerobic system, meaning if you want to run fast, you're going to need a quick energy source. And that's going to come from those anaerobic systems or carbohydrate. That system is dependent on, the usage of carbohydrates, which comes from the muscle and stored glycogen inside the muscle. And so typically fast twitch fibers use the anaerobic system.
So if I need to go boom really quick someplace, that's not an aerobic system I'm pulling on. It's an anaerobic system.
Yeah,
right.
So you have those two systems because of that reason right there. Like if you want to get up and sprint, right, you don't have to wait for, 10, 12, 15 minutes for the aerobic systems.
It's instant on, baby.
Correct.
High power, but I can only use it for a short duration, right? Because once the sugar, the glycogen stores start to deplete, what happens?
Yeah, so it's not so much that you'll ever deplete them, but as you utilize carbohydrate for fuel, you have lactate. You'll produce one of those breakdowns is lactate, right? And these hydrogen ions become saturated inside the muscle. So you're going to produce more lactate than you can utilize.
And that's lactic acid is kind of what I hear a lot about.
Yeah, it's not lactic acid because your body will defend against
Okay.
becoming acidic. And that's essentially what a hydrogen ion is. We're going to get down.
No, I love it. That's why we're trying to dispel this here, right? So
Yeah,
I hear lactic acid when I hear lactate, but they're not the same thing.
They're technically not
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think of it this way. So your body always tries to regulate your pH. Like it doesn't want you to get too acidic. It doesn't want you to get too alkaline.
Right.
So it likes to be neutral. Right. So as you start sprinting and you start utilizing carbohydrate, lactate is developed inside the muscle.
Right.
And so lactate then can buffer or be used as fuel. But the problem is you have these hydrogen ions that start to build up, right? And that starts to change the pH of the muscle. And body doesn't like that. It's going to defend against that, right? So as a consequence of running fast, you become acidic,
Right.
And so the fast twitch fibers are typically responsible from the anaerobic systems.
Got it. And so like if I'm hauling around the track and my legs start to feel real heavy and I'm starting to get butt lock, what does that mean? What's happening there?
Yeah, you're defending against becoming acidic. I mean, and we don't entirely know. That's just the thing. Like we don't.
Because
really
if I run out of sugars, my body is going to not allow that, to your point. I
won't
won't do that. Body won't allow it.
Correct.
I'm going to stop running because I'm basically going to just shut down before I completely.
Yeah, exactly. So when you become acidic, it affects some of the calcium, potassium pumps, right? So your muscle contractions can't continue at that forceful rate anymore, right? And that's kind of what we call fatigue.
Yeah.
Right. And lactate necessarily, I mean, it's part of that process. And we, like when we prick a finger and look at blood lactate, we're looking at what's not necessarily directly what's happening inside the muscle, but we're looking at what's getting pushed out into the blood. Right. And so we can kind of use that as like an association between this buildup of these hydrogen ions and how acidic, you're becoming. Right. So yeah, you can't become acidic. Like it's not a healthy state.
Right. Okay, so if we kind of pull way back again, so we have the aerobic system that's focused on using oxygen as its primary energy source. We have the anaerobic system that uses
without oxygen.
Oxygen.
You can use carbohydrate for fuel without
lactate
oxygen.
Potentially, right?
Yep.
As a byproduct of it.
It's a breakdown. Yep.
Right. So how, if we think about it in the context of training, if you want to be a good endurance athlete, which system do you train more of?
Endurance athlete meaning like events over like 10 minutes, 12 minutes?
Sure. Let's take a 5K.
5K, so like 15 minutes and up.
Yeah.
Your aerobic systems are going to
Most people are more than 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Aerobic systems are going to be your dominant system in that case. Yeah. Based on duration. Because the energy systems work off of duration. Right. So the longer your event, the more you're going to need to make those aerobic systems very, very robust.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And I mean, I use a Garmin watch and it's got bands, right? It's got my aerobic zone. It's got my easy zone. It's got aerobic threshold. It's got threshold. How does that map into aerobic or anaerobic systems? Are they 1-to-1? And how do I think about like if I'm just walking and am I using my aerobic system only? Like walk me through that.
Yeah. So, I mean, no, that's a good question because technically you are always. It's not like these aerobic and anaerobic systems are like fighting against each other. Like,
right.
They work together. They kind of work in concert, right? And so they can kind of feed each other and fuel each other. And they work back and forth. But if you and I are here at rest, we're using predominantly fat as a fuel. So because it's not intense, we don't have a problem, using the aerobic systems.
Right.
Because it's pretty low key, it's chill.
Right.
You can use fats for fuel.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons. So one of the other topics we'll cover here is, strength training. And you were talking earlier a little bit about how keeping speed work and especially in masters athletes, we just don't work that system. So is it fair to say that masters athletes would have generally more work to do in an anaerobic system or aerobic system?
Okay, so here's the thing. So like we have two systems. We have more than two systems. I mean, we're not even talking about the creatine phosphate system, which is like your 0 to 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like free energy, right? But so we have two systems for a reason. right? And so it's not that you ever want to like exclude one in favor of like building another. So like
Right.
if I'm trying to build someone's aerobic system, we're always keeping some sort of sprinting kind of year round. So
Yeah.
we keep like those coordination rates.
Yeah.
We keep them using lactate, like the ability to use lactate, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
yep, at a high capacity. And every athlete's different. Like
Yeah. Right.
some athletes, can produce a ton of lactate. Like you can get a 400-meter guy and like they can produce a ton of lactate and have a big anaerobic capacity. And, they're going to be very inefficient running aerobically, and
You're talking about me, of course. One more lap? No, thank you.
yeah. But say we have two systems for a reason. So like you want to keep them all developed and trained year round to some capacity. Like
Yeah.
I would never go too long without hitting it. Like 7 to 10
Yeah.
day cycle, you want to hit each system.
And it's interesting too, because I feel like as I've trained and I've seen other masters athletes, like you see a lot of people that are running, it seems primarily in their aerobic zone. Like they're running at a good pace, but you don't see a lot of older athletes, I feel like, sprinting. Like
Yeah.
it kind of feels a little bit weird, but actually it's something that should absolutely be in the repertoire, right? Like on a regular basis, as long as of course you're not causing injury or something like that. But that activity itself has a really big impact on a master's athlete that maybe is underdeveloping that or biasing not towards it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think an easy way to start with that is because like sprinting is so demanding
Yeah.
that like even if you get on a hill, like and just some sub max.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to really be careful how you progress this, right? Because even when you get fit, like you're gonna run into connective tissue hiccups and and
Yeah.
it's good feedback, but you're not broken, you're not injured. Young kids get same stuff,
That's right.
Yeah, you're not fragile.
Anything else on aerobic, anaerobic systems that you want to cover?
Yeah, not so much. I think kind of the take home message there is don't wait too long until you get this big out of desperation. And I'm not even talking to athletes. I'm just saying general population in general. Like see how long you can hold that stuff in there. Start early.
Yeah.
Keep it going because there's some data out there that show that these fast twitch fibers actually denervate, and like once they're gone, like we're not sure you can get them back.
Yeah.
But of course we like to tell people it's never too late to start. But like that's like if you're my financial advisor and I'm 60 years old and I say, hey John, I want to start saving for retirement.
Right.
And you're gonna ask me, okay,
Here's my first $1.
yeah, right. And you're probably gonna tell me like it's not too late, but we need to
Just so
get
much,
this rolling. Yeah.
Well, I think that's interesting too. I think, one of the, again, part of the goal here with Master Lead is to have really honest discussions. And certainly one of the things that's motivated me in my journey was the understanding that you can develop fast twitch muscles into your 60s, and it's like, oh, geez, I can keep going, right? But the flip side is, to your point, and I think one that you would make is, but there is a stage in which no matter how optimistic you are, no matter how motivated you are, the biology is just going to keep kind of pulling you back, right? And that's part of what we want to do here is talk openly and plainly and honestly about where those stages are. And it's never necessarily good or bad, right? It is what it is.
Right.
And certainly taking the journey and keeping up sprinting and anaerobic capacity well beyond your 60s, even if you haven't done it in a while, is probably still beneficial to a certain degree. But there is a point in which you're going to start to have to face some of the realities of aging and biology. And hopefully we can create the kind of dialogue and context where it's like, yep, that's going to happen. And what are you going to do with it? And you can still be really fit. And you can still be really successful along the way. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think you're kind of spot on with that. The only thing that really changes those absolute metrics, in college, if you're there's different mindsets on this and there's different personalities that, drive these different behaviors. But, like if we look at like you, for example, you may never be a 48, 49 guy in the 400 anymore. Right.
Right.
But as a 45-year-old male, you can be the best sub 5 miler that you can be.
Right. Right.
And that has so much other value that trickles out into, different areas of your life too.
Right.
So yeah, there's more to it than just that goal or the race or the outcome. I mean, I rarely race because of just the process is so much of the value or the benefit, right?
Yeah, right.
And you get to a race and you're just fit enough to jump in a race or whenever you want because you can,
Yeah, which you can do.
We do, yeah.
Okay, so let's turn to another topic that we've talked a lot about. I think is really fascinating. So generally, if you kind of look at aging, there's this idea of specificity in sports training, right? Again, whether or not it's cycling or running, sports specific, race specific type of training. And yet there's a lot of really good data outside of just sports data that having flexibility, muscle movement, those kind of things, as you age, increases lifespan. And it makes a ton of sense, right? Like you're more likely to fall down the stairs because of, some immobility or something walking around the house than you are, to die of a heart attack when you're running a fast mile or something like that. So, but they're not always working together, right? And so, I think about a couple of times, maybe it was last year or something. I think you were doing something around, maybe it was the chicken coop or something like that, and you pulled something, right? And and it kind of sets you sideways. And I've had other friends that are over 40 who are like, yeah, I was just bending down at the table, and I felt the knee, kind of go out or something like that. So that kind of gets to like, how do you think about training for a specific event, but also making sure that as an older human, you're also introducing variance into movement, into the neuropsychology. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so there's some key components. So
Okay.
if you can adopt an aerobic program, and anaerobic systems, like develop them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And people call that cardiovascular activity, right? You got that. If you can get some strength training in there,
Yeah.
and you can get some flexibility training,
Yeah.
you pretty much have your bases covered. We won't go down nutrition because that's a whole different,
Another show.
whole different
Tune in
wild,
next
wild
time.
west. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's literally, I don't think it's any more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And back to your thing about like the specificity towards training for a race.
Yeah.
I think that's just part of the accountability. Like
Yeah.
people sometimes need that for accountability
Yeah.
until you fall in love with the process. When you fall in love with the process, you're just going to be fit at certain times of the year
Yeah.
where you're like, yeah, if my schedule allows it, like I'm going to jump in that race and roll.
Yeah.
There's
Right,
that
right.
mindset. But some people want to know what's my schedule, where am I at,
Yeah.
and it's accountability.
Right.
But either way, it's even as a very disciplined athlete, like it's that race or the specificity towards the race hold you accountable to like your priorities and your values because you've identified those.
Right.
And the race is just one of those things to kind of keep you honest.
Yeah.
Right. Like aging does. Aging keeps us honest.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, you said something in there I think is also really important in that, which is, to be good, you have to be an athlete, a good athlete. And that's also been something that I've always kept in mind too, which is like, to your point, you can't just do one of those things. You have to keep strength training in you. And like yoga is something that I need to do more of. But every time I do, I'm like, oh, this feels so good, right? Because I get so much tension running built up in here. And then it's like, oh, like it kind of releases that there. And just keeping that idea that I'm an athlete and, first, and I'm trying to be as specific as I can in the mile race, for me at least at this point. But always kind of coming back to that when I feel like I might be kind of losing my North Star. It's like, what should I do today? Well, whatever's going to make me a really good athlete, right? At the end of the day, and kind of letting the chips fall outside of that. And I think that's important too, because you can certainly for me, I can get a little myopic on, man, I'm trying to be a really good runner. And that's not the case, right? I need to be a really good athlete that then is good at running to a certain degree.
Yeah. I mean, that's even with like my high school athletes, they don't know this at the time, but like because of what you just said, like I'm always promoting like multi-sport athletes.
Yeah.
And at the high school level. So like a lot of my best female runners, they play basketball, they play softball, they run cross country, they do track. Yeah. And so the reason I like to promote that kind of stuff, or allow my kids like throw the football and stuff before, is because they're just working on overall athleticism, and that stuff's really easy to do and teach as a youngster, right? Yeah. So if they are good enough and athletic enough to play multiple sports, like I keep encouraging it, until they get to about their senior year, and it's like, all right, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Are you gonna run in college?
Right.
You gonna play basketball in college? You're gonna play softball, tennis, whatever it might be. Then they can start to specialize a little bit, But like if you can develop your overall athleticism at any age.
Yeah, any age.
Goes a long ways.
Yeah. Okay, so last topic here we'll cover. Talk to me about one of your favorite runs that you've done this year.
One of my favorite runs I've done this year. That's a good one. I didn't expect this. What we did today was pretty fun.
That was pretty fun.
We had 4 Masters guys on the track on the same day.
Beautiful morning.
Benny's
sunrise.
Benny's
nice
got a
out.
full-time job, 2 kids.
Right.
I don't really know what you do with your life, but
Well, I'm obviously struggling.
Corey's full-time job, 2 kids working, his wife's working. When those kind of things come together, and 4 different types of athletes too.
Yeah, that was interesting watching, the 4 of us kind of trot around there in our own ways too, and but that's one of the things I love about, the journey here too. And certainly being a master lead has been a really fun journey. That's been the most rewarding part, getting to meet guys like you. And of course, I'm inspired by the stories and seeing like, how do they handle that work-life balance, and how do you kind of keep trucking on, and what happens when you have to go focus on something else and then come back, right? And there's compassion that you have to show to yourself, and forgiveness and patience and those kind of things that you now, as an older person, right, probably have a better capacity to apply than a 22-year-old, whereas a 22-year-old can biologically just kind of do it, right? So it kind of works out, but it's an interesting sort of way to frame it up there. But yeah, no, I thought today was really fun too.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with the best one was the last one.
All right, I like it. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being here for the first Master Lead podcast. I love working with you. You're a great coach. I know a lot of other people enjoy working with you. If someone wants to get connected with you, where can they go?
Sure, they can find me on a website, brave-chicken.com, or just shoot me an email at coachburkart@gmail.com as well. So it's Coach Burkart, B as in boy, URKART @gmail.com. Also on social media. I don't check it too frequently, but you can check that out as well.